the City of Tampa's Barrio Latino Commission. Welcome everyone, I'm John Thompson, Chair of the Commission. If you're here to present a project, you'll have limited time to make a presentation, so we suggest being thorough but concise when coming to the microphone. You will need to identify yourself and your relationship to the project. The Commissioners will not ask any questions during your presentation. Your project should be presented in the following order: site plan, elevations, architectural details, wall sections. Staff presents staff report. We will then ask for public comment. Following your presentation, the Commissioners will be taking questions in the same order as the presentation. Please state and spell your name clearly if you're here to speak for or against the project. Your time will be limited to 3 minutes, so take some time now to summarize your comments because 3 minutes goes by very quickly. Following public comment, the applicant will have 5 minutes for rebuttal. The public hearing will then be closed. The only comments which will be allowed after the public hearing is closed will be in response to any questions from the Commissioners. The Commissioners will then discuss the case and will make their decision based on the City ordinance, Chapter 27 of the City Zoning Code, the design guidelines, the Secretary of Interior standards, design review comments, and the testimony given in this public hearing. The BLC can only act on items that are within our specific jurisdictional responsibility. Owner agents are independently responsible to obtain any appropriate permits and/or approvals. If you haven't already done so, please silence cell phones. And if we can introduce commissioners from my left.
Good morning, I'm Eric Schiller.
Good morning, Alex Andriakos.
Good morning, Liz Welch.
And we have with us today Dennis Fernandez, Ron Vila, Beverly Juzak, and Kamaria Pettis-Mackel for legal.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Next item on the agenda is the reading of the minutes from July 28th. We need a motion to approve these minutes.
So moved.
We need a second.
Second.
Any comment? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting minutes are approved. Announcements.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dennis Fernandez, Architecture Review and Historic Preservation Manager. Just one point of information for you. The staff will be reaching out to you in the next week or so to try to designate a time when we can do a virtual workshop. We've had a number of commissioners request workshops over the last few weeks, and with the social distancing requirements, it's a little challenging, but we're going to look at doing that in a virtual form. So be prepared just to maybe have your calendar available when we can speak so that we can identify some dates that might be possible for that workshop. We also have the BLC staff reviews to enter into the record for July 2020. And with that, I believe we're going to move on to conflicts of interest and ex parte communication.
Good morning. My name is Kamaria Pettis-Mackel from the City Attorney's Office. Can any of the commissioners please state on the record whether or not they have any conflict of interest regarding the item that's on the agenda this morning? For the record, I see hot head nods to say no, acknowledging no. Additionally, have there been any ex parte communication with any of the commissioners regarding the item that's listed on the agenda this morning? Seeing no response from the commissioners, or I acknowledge that there's one no response, I have nothing further.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ron Vila. I'm staff with Historic Preservation. Moving down the agenda under continuations, there are none reflected on today's agenda. So move to the swear-in. Everybody that wishes to testify, please stand up and raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this morning is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you, Ms. Juzak. So we're ready for the first case, which is BLC 20-136 for the address of 2706 East 9th Avenue. This is a contributing structure that dates back to 1938. It is a structure of a famed vernacular form. It's about 760 square feet, and the request is for demolition of that contributing structure. Attached to your staff report on page 3 are the Code of Ordinances, specifically Chapter 27F 1 through 3. These are the items that need to be addressed this morning as the agent moves through his presentation to seek demolition. Moving to the photo essay, I wanted to start first with our vicinity map. The local district is highlighted in the red. Property in question is over here on the eastern boundary. In the early 2000s, 22nd Street used to be our eastern boundary. Then we expanded it to encompass the area that's indicated on the vicinity map. So this structure is in the expansion area from the early 2000s. This is a Sanborn map that also shows the boundaries of the local district. So from 22nd to 27th or 28th, it was expanded. As I indicated, property in question is highlighted in the green. This structure was not here. This structure was constructed in 38, as I indicated. This is an overhead shot. In the historic districts, usually the front yard setbacks all line up, and you see over here how there is a jogging of the front yards. So the property here sits really far back on the parcel that it's attached to. Moving to some of the current conditions. This is looking from the street. You see the generous front yard. And as you get a little closer, just walking around the structure, you see some vegetation, and then you see, this is the eastern elevation. More visible elevation here. And the agent will get into the details. I just wanted to show a broad scope of what the building looks like today. And moving around to the rear. Obviously, this was an addition some time ago. The surrounding properties. This is a contributing structure as well, although it's been altered, but on our map it's indicating it's contributing. This is to the west. This is the property to the east. Directly across the street, they have vacant land and some street shots. This is looking from the subject site, which is here, looking back into Ybor City, back towards 22nd Street, which is to the west. And the subject site is here, and then looking to the east to the boundary, or eastern boundary, and the termination of that road. That concludes the photo presentation. I'll have Diego address the board at this time.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning, guys.
Morning.
Okay, my name is Diego Duran. I am the agent for the owner of the property. I am an architect working for Sharp Design Studio. And then here with me, so Taylor Moser, who's not going to be presenting, just assisting the images. And so to start with, thank you everybody for being here. Going to the point, the purpose of this application is to obtain approval for the demolition of this designated structure located at 2706 East 9th Avenue. And the reason being that the building presents structural damage that compromises the stability of the building, ultimately making it an imminent threat to the health and safety of the immediate neighborhood. So our owner acquired the property in July of 2019. The previous owner who sold it to our owner in 2018 did try to go through the process of demoing the house, but as soon as he found out of all the steps, he basically retracted and said, okay, you can have the property. He sold it to our owner. And then with that immediately came some code violations because the property is clearly in a state of decay. So after the city inspectors went through the property, they obviously had some violations on the conditions of the house, to which the owner acted immediately to start the process of, what do we need to do to fix it up, and in this case, try to get this certificate for demolishing the property. So going through, section 27-99 F, I'm going to touch base on some of those points, or all of those points, and how we're trying to really make sense of what's going on with the condition of the structure. We did go inside several times and did try to make an assessment to consider the actual condition of the property, meaning, is it actually worth demoing? Like, is there anything salvageable that we could make work? So, our first intent obviously understanding that this is in the district, and it is a designated structure, we wanted to take care of those things, and by doing so, obviously, we inspected the property, we took some pictures, and looked at the conditions. So just by looking at the outside, of course, you can see there's a lot of superficial damage. Roof is falling apart due to mainly softening of the wood. Trusses are not in good condition. The house has been through some pretty bad damage due to organics like termites. There's carpenter ants. There's mycelial growth from fungus on the wood being a little too humid. Of course, unfortunately, it has been vacant for a while. It is my understanding the property sat vacant after the owner passed away. The neighbors found out that the owner has passed away after a few weeks of him being deceased. So ever since the property has been vacant, the value for which the house was bought was basically for the land value, not the assessed value, which is a little bit over $100,000. So the property was bought for basically the land value. At the time, the owner acquired the property. He does have some plans for developing and has quite a bit of a big lot for redeveloping and rehabilitating Ybor City. So I'll go back to some of the details. We consider as burden of proof the alternatives to demolition or relocation based off of the planned development district. And this is a single lot in this residential district, so there are no alternatives as the property obviously is the only property in that single lot in this residential district. Whether the landmark or building or structure can be retained on site. By looking at this, and I'll go through some of the details, but we looked at rehabilitating the structure as is part of the 4 steps of rehabilitation for historic preservation. And at the point in which the house is retaining the structure on site is really just not possible due to the structural conditions of the building. Whether relocating the landmark or building is appropriate or feasible. To relocate the landmark, first we'll have to, obviously try to relocate it. We did consult with a couple companies. One of them was on site immediately and was not able to quite provide an estimate. Well, first off, we need a location to place this house, and is there any significant value that we could use if the case was relocating, but it's just, going back to the burden of proof, is it worth spending all this money to relocate a structure that as soon as it's lifted, likely will have several structural issues that will not permit it. So we determined that it would not be feasible to relocate a structure. As a continuing on burden of proof, we have whether the applicant has the ability to build a proposed new construction within a reasonable period of time. And at the time, the owner is not looking to rebuild. Due to the pandemic, there's a lot of plans that are on hold. We don't know what's going on as far as rebuilding on that site. As I said before, the owner does have a few properties, one of them being a couple blocks south, and does he have the ability to build it? Absolutely. He's spending shy of $1 million just to repoint the brick and restore the storefront and the windows, because he has such love for Ybor City that he does want to make this, a great place, restore its fabric and make it a destination. So yes, he has the ability. Unfortunately, at this time, we just don't have a use for the property. If we decided, or when we decide to go ahead and build something, we will have to obviously follow the ordinances and rules of the historic district, and I'm sure we're going to be building, a very nice structure that complements Ybor City as it should. For that matter, I think at this time it's not feasible to consider the reconstruction or even relocation of the property. So economic hardship, we looked at the estimates for demolition, which is actually nice because it's about $10,000 for demolition and salvage any structural, non-structural, any historic elements that we may find of value, like louvers. The fact is that the house at some point sure had some pretty nice features, like the actual louvers that vent the attic. Looks amazing, looks great. Unfortunately, it's completely eaten up by termites. One of the companies that we called in for the demolition said that the house seemed to be put together by the termites holding hands. So, unfortunately, it is in a pretty bad state of composition as far as like the organics go and wood trusses and just the simple framing of the house. So, so we did look at demolition, which again is going to be about $10,000. And then moving down again, economic hardship, we're going to go into the report from a licensed engineer or architect with experience in rehabilitation to the structural soundness of structure and its suitability for relocation or rehabilitation. So, once again, we looked at rehab as soon as we got to the site. We said, could we salvage any of this? Realistically, no. So we're way past rehabilitation. So we looked at structural soundness, and that's, when we went to do our first inspection, that was my biggest concern, is just seeing how the house is so, it's in such bad condition structurally that at that point, you kind of have to put aside, the fact that you're looking at this historic building for a second, and then think as my responsibility as an architect, knowing that potentially this house is struggling with structural failure. Had we had the storm today, I realistically would have been concerned if the storm is going through here, this would have been flying up in the air. And, we all know what flying debris, especially wood decomposing, can become sharp objects and whatnot. So going, towards the actual details of the structure of the house is built on piers, which are, again, decomposing. Some of them have deteriorated because of settling in the ground, so they're no longer actually supporting the structure. Because of the piers not supporting the structure, then the beams are floating, but the beams are wood, and the wood has rotten. So there is the mycelial growth that we talked about. There is, rotten wood. The original joists from the floor are quite soft to the touch. Meaning as soon as you lose some of those piers because of ground settling or just simply because of the mortar falling apart, the wood enters, that joist or beam enters in, a deflection mode that is not meant to sustain, and, lastly ends up collapsing, which is what you can see in a lot of the portions of the structure. So again, structurally, foundation, we have concrete piers, which are not underground. Everything's above ground, just over the grade. Foundation-wise, we have the joist. And then going up, we have obviously the frame, which the studs are, some of them are in okay condition, but the majority of them, and I should say all of them, have been affected by the weather. So a lot of mold, a lot of black mold. And then obviously, like I said, the studs and going up into the rafters, you could say trusses. There are some steel plates still attaching the structure, but you can see how the nails and some of the screws in certain locations are actually pulling away from the wood because, again, the wood has expanded and is no longer capable of resisting, any shear, you could say, which is its purpose as it's attaching and making the structure stand. Going up into the roof, obviously, is held by the trusses, which are also deteriorated. At this point, as you walk into the house, the floor is falling apart. There are literally holes on the floor where you can see the grades, some of the plumbing, touching base on the building systems on the house, talking about mechanical. There are no air conditionings at this moment. I'm just bringing that up as a survey basis, kind of. The electrical has been removed. At some point, there was an application to TECO from the previous owner to remove the electrical, which it was done. So luckily, at this point, we are not in an hazard regarding, some of the electrical as it has been removed at least. Plumbing wise, it's obviously not in good shape. There is no water to the side at this time, but the pipes are all still connected. Finally, the assessment was to rehabilitate the place. We basically have to change the entire structure of the house. So that's out the window. To preserve the house is just impossible based of its, the state of decomposition, which it is due to lack of attention, which unfortunately has been happening through the years. I believe when the house was added to the map, I want to say it was in 2008, even at that survey pictures taken at the time, you can still see that there is some of the damage, which you can see in the pictures by the deflection of the roof trusses and the roof falling down. And again, that's back to 2008, so that whole thing started to happen a long time ago. I should say there was an attempt to fix some of those things, but it was likely done by the owner. There are wood fillers in a number of locations where the termites basically ate up the main structural studs. And you can see how it's basically, causing greater damage than it ever was held at all. That's essentially as it goes for our inspection or our report. We definitely recommend the demolition of the property. And again, the main thing is we don't know realistically. I don't think this structure can withhold any load. Live or dead loads, absolutely not. It was difficult to walk through it. So we move on to the estimated market value of the property, where we can kind of see a lot of the properties around the area are selling for 130, 150. I think the most expensive one around the area is about 180-ish. As far as land goes, it's pretty much in good shape. It's anywhere between $40,000 and $60,000 for the land. To that, we start talking about that we get an estimate from a consultant on what it would take to bring this house up to code, and not even talking about code, just bring this house up to not being an imminent threat to life safety. We got a couple of proposals. One of them was from Via Construction, which they said, sure, we'll rehab this place as is. Basically, we'll go in and we'll fix the joists and we'll basically reframe it and everything from the inside out. And the number was around $800,000 or so, which is completely absurd. We then looked at the possibility of what it would take to rebuild right now with a fairly larger square footage. Currently, the square footage is right at 700 square feet and change. So we propose maybe going to 900 to 1,000 square feet, just to be a little bit more in the game with the surrounding properties. And that came out from one of our bidders at around $530,000, which would include demolition and cleaning the site and then rebuilding brand new house to comply with some of those historical features, including the wood detailing and wood using any type of vinyl or composite. The property again was bought or purchased by an owner on July 19 of 2019 for $53,000 from BLG LLC, which is the previous owner. The property has not been income producing. It is in no way in state for being occupied. There is no mortgage in the property. And then any appraisals obtained within the 2 previous years by the owner essentially were at around $118,000 for 2017 and 2018. We have not done an appraisal since 2018 when the property was purchased, because again, it was sold basically just off of the price of the land. We have not tried to list the property. Again, I think what the owner's trying to do is definitely maintain the property, and he does have a pretty good plan for revitalizing the area as much as possible. The assessed property with value, again, we have not looked into the assessing the property as far as a formal appraisal. As far as real estate taxes from the previous 2 years, 2018, 2019, it was $266 for 2018 and $684 for 2019. The ownership of the property currently is through an LLC, which is a for-profit LLC, from the same owner that owns the other properties around the area. And so that is basically your summary of going through section 27-99. And final remarks is, we honestly would say definitely keep the house if it was in any condition to do so. I realistically do not feel like the property should remain. It is definitely a hazard to the community. Structurally, it's in no good shape to say that we could either salvage or at least keep it around by putting plywood in the windows. It would not happen. I was approached by an owner surrounding the area. His name is Joe Satterley, which I believe he owns a couple of properties around. And he said that he'd be willing to do whatever it took to support our idea of them owning the house. He says it's just a place for transient people to occupy. It's not good for the community. There's pests, there's vermin. He thinks it's definitely best to demo the property. And he's actually our neighbor right to the east, also to the north. So he does own a couple of properties in the area. That's all I got, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ron Vila, staff with Historic Preservation. Moving to the staff report, that staff did review this submission packet and is complete and addresses all the items in Chapter 2799F 1 through 3. We worked with the agent to provide a complete presentation as presented this morning, and all the items were addressed. At this time, it's a finding of fact with the information that was presented, and additional questions can be directed towards the agent at this time to assess the request this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. We have the opportunity for public comment. I don't see anybody here to ask a question, so we can go to the commissioners for questions, starting on my left.
Is there an alley on that block?
There is no alley on that block.
And is it contiguous with the property?
I'm sorry, is it what?
Does it abut the property?
Right, there's no alley.
Oh, no alley.
No alley.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. What's the lot size?
Lot size is 5,300 square feet.
So 50 by 100.
Right.
I have no questions.
I have no questions.
The question for you, you had a slide or you had an image that was E through L, and we talked through all of them on the particular the 2799 F and 3, and then you had a summary that had the E through L. Have you submitted the remainder of that, the A, B, C, D portion? Mr. Vila says that we've got a complete submittal that's
Yes.
consistent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, the images are just supporting images, but we have about a 120-page book
Okay.
with all the
Okay.
information and exhibits.
Well, I don't have any questions. I mean, like you said, the termites are holding hands there. Well, okay. So there's nothing, you've been able to answer the questions. I don't see any need to rebut any of what's been asked thus far. So,
But, excuse me, Kamaria Pettis-Mackle for the record, just can we clarify whether or not the applicant does want to use that 5 minutes for a rebuttal if he
Sure.
feels necessary?
we're getting ready to close the public hearing and discuss the case and make a motion amongst the commissioners. You have 5 minutes to add anything, or, you know, if there's anything that you heard that you want to add on to that makes your case. Now's the time.
No, I think I'm good to go. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we'll close the public hearing and we can discuss the case amongst the commissioners. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I have some thoughts. If you look at the front gable over what used to probably be a porch, it's as straight as an arrow. And where the piers, the concrete piers, have subsided, that sill is surprisingly straight. I've seen a lot worse buildings in Ybor City redone. So that's my opinion.
I don't have anything.
Any additional comments? Yeah, I think that in terms of the condition of the property, it seems like, as Commissioner Schiller has indicated, that he's seen worse. And, you know, there's the spectrum of what is acceptable and what isn't. So I think that, you know, as an architect looking at it, that would be, it seems like it'd be a project that you would start peeling stuff back and you'd never stop until you had a new project. One at a time, you know, a piece of wood at a time, you'd end up with a completely new project, which is a challenging project, to say the least. So I think that if we have the information online, or, you know, in the as presented in the hearing and on the record that supports the demolition, we can entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, but it will be a motion to deny. If
Well-
the rest of the commissioners want to do it.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, Mr. Commissioner, if I may, instead of discussing what your motion is, if you want to make your motion and see if there's a second, we can go, that's the route that the city attorney's office is requesting the commissioner to do, as opposed to discussing what your motion is. Just, if you could just make your motion and see if there's a second for it.
I'll be happy to do that, but respectfully, we are in a discussion period, so we're discussing. But I'll be happy to make the motion.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought Mr. Chair had finished I thought you had finished the discussion.
Well, I guess it's maybe a point of order, but what I'm asking for is there a motion that we'd like to entertain? So,
I'll make a motion. This morning, I moved to deny a certificate of appropriateness to demolish for BLC 20-136 for the property located at 2706 East 9th Avenue, inasmuch as the agent has not satisfied the requirements of Chapter 27, Section 2799, City of Tampa Code of Ordinance.
we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Seeing that there's no second, that motion
Right.
fails.
Understood. We need a motion. I bet you I know what it should say.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I move to grant certificate of, to grant the certificate of approval, appropriateness, for the drawings and documents presented at the public hearing in BLC for BLC 2136 for the property located at 2706 East 9th Avenue. Based on the findings of fact, the proposed project is consistent with the Ybor City Design Guidelines of the City of Tampa for the following reasons. And for successful, what am I saying? Successful completion of the Section 27-99 applications.
Madam Commissioner, if I may, the language for the demolition motion is at the bottom of the motion.
Got it. So I read the whole wrong one? Got it. You want me to reread?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
So we need a motion.
Yes.
We need a motion. That was practice. Sorry, guys. That was practice. Okay, we move to grant the certificate of appropriateness to demolish for BLC 20-136 for the property located at 2706 East 9th Avenue, inasmuch as the agent has satisfied the requirement of Chapter 27, Section 27-99, City of Tampa Code of Ordinance.
We have a motion. We need a second.
I'll second.
We have a motion with a second with really no conditions attached to it, so all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed? No.
Thank you. 3-1, motion carries.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And with that, we have no further business for the day, and so we will adjourn the meeting. See you next time.
All right, thank you very much.